Hey guys, I'm Travis Weirs, and welcome to the Cine Kit List podcast. Today, my guests are Sir Roger Deakins and James Deakins, also known as Team Deakins. Roger is an Oscar-winning cinematographer, and together they host the industry-leading Team Deakins podcast. They're here with us in Kansas City this weekend for a series of events, including a book signing of their photography book, Byways, and a special screening of the World War I film 1917 at the National World War I Museum tomorrow. Thank you both for being here.
Sure.
We're happy to be here.
Pleasure to be here. Yeah.
It's our first time in Kansas City. We like it.
What do you think so far?
It's great. It's a really nice city.
You know, I was going to start out asking about the podcast because this is a podcast, but I was thinking on the drive here, you know, Sir Roger Deakins.
Yeah, that's a bit odd when you said that. Yeah.
How did that come about?
I have no idea.
Who approached you?
Actually, the British government, through the British consulate, contacted me because I've had dealings with them before, and said, because they ask you in the beginning, will he accept it? Because they're not going to offer it to you if you won't accept it. And I had to go to Roger and say, come on, Roger, your dad would love this.
Yeah, that's true.
And we said yes, and it went fine.
It was actually very nice.
It was
We went
lovely.
to, after the pandemic, we went to Windsor Castle. Mm-hmm. And it was Charles, now King Charles, but he wasn't then, who was doing the thing with the sword. It was really nice, but what I remember most is I was walking out and they had a little
String quartet.
string quartet, yeah, and one of the musicians put her instrument down and just clapped as I walked out.
Silently.
Silently. And it was just a really nice little moment. I thought it was really sweet.
It really struck me, too, because we had done also a CBE, which was another thing at a palace and all that.
What's a CBE?
Commander of the British Empire, which
Oh,
Roger is a commander,
of the-
too. Yes.
That sounds even more
So you-
impressive.
Well, I think there's still
You
the
better be
Falkland
careful.
Isles, you know. I mean, come on. No, it's tradition. I mean, it's
nice.
just tradition.
It's a nice
so, you know.
honor. But you go there and they are so welcoming, the palace people, and they act as if they're so excited that you showed up, that it's such an honor for them that you showed up. But you go to the Academy Awards and it's the opposite. Oh, you're so lucky to be here. You're honored that you get to come. So there's quite a difference in it. And it was really a good experience.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But I think it's recognition of, the people behind the director. You know what I mean? It's a filmmaking. It's not me. I think it's an award for, film crews, because the industry in the UK now is quite strong.
And it's good because it's the only cinematographer that's been acknowledged this way. So it's important to accept and say yes.
Yeah, you're the only cinematographer that's ever been knighted.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, what was your reaction when James first brought that to you?
Oh, well, it was just kind of sort of strange, isn't it?
Well, because we had gone through the CBE first, his first reaction was no. And then I got back to the British Society of Cinematographers, who had contacted me, and she said, "You've got to be kidding. You've got to make
Doesn't
him
really
accept."
speak like that. Your accent's terrible. It's always been terrible, James.
Yeah, but it's good.
So speaking of podcasts, your podcast, it launched in 2020. Can you talk a little bit about the genesis behind the Team Deakins podcast? How long had you been ruminating about starting one before you started?
I still don't know what a podcast is. Really.
Not very long.
No.
We have a website where we answer questions. So it's all about giving back to people. And we did a lot of publicity for 1917 in the beginning of the year, and we found that after the Q&As, we'd get off stage and we'd get surrounded by people, and they would be asking the same questions. So I said to Roger, well, maybe we should do a podcast that answers these questions. And he said, oh, well, what's a podcast? And I said, well, I don't really know, because I'm not really
I was being flippant, really. I do know what a podcast is. Michael.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
No.
So we decided, and so it started out just answering technical questions, but it took a life of its own because it was during lockdown. We started it just before, and then we got into lockdown, so a lot of people had a lot of free time. So we talked to people, and we realized how interesting it was to talk to people, oftentimes people who do the same job, but in different ways. And, but the similarity between all of them is their passion for what they do.
But also, I think it became an excuse for us to talk to people we didn't know. Yeah. I mean, it was great to talk to
Andrei Zvagintsev in Russia.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, how amazing is that to have a conversation with a
director that you admire.
In my mind, one of the really great directors working today. So, you know, it's been great. And then we talked to
Neil Jordan. That was exciting.
Alexei Rodionov, the cinematographer who shot Come and See, Ilham Klimov's film. So it was just such a treat for us to talk to all these people, you know.
Yeah, your genuine curiosity for other people's work and their passion and their process is really evident in the episodes, and I think that's one of the things that makes it special. Is that something that you both bonded over?
Yeah, well, I think it's just really interesting how people have had different routes into the film business, but also different approaches to the way they make films, you know, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about filmmaking. It's people come from different places, don't they?
Yeah, and we have a great curiosity. So it's a wonderful opportunity to ask people, why did you do it that way? What did you think of beforehand? And before we actually do an episode, we do a lot of homework. We watch a lot of their movies. And so it brings up a lot of questions in our minds. But when we actually sit down and talk to them, we don't necessarily always refer to our paper because it's really important to us that it be a conversation. And it's much more interesting anyway because it can go a completely different way than we thought. And we just have to go with it.
Yeah.
What are some of the standout episodes or moments on the show for you both?
Well, they're all
you know,
so
they're
interesting.
all sort of interesting, because they're so different, you know, and especially when James asked the first question, how did you get where you are? You know, basically, how did you start out in the business? It's really interesting, people's different journeys. There was a production designer who kept chickens in his backyard.
Had a chicken farm.
A chicken farm, and he was selling that so he could save up to...
When he sold it, he had enough money to go to London to start doing what he does. So it means that it doesn't matter where you're starting out. You can end up there if you want to.
Is that part of the reason for the podcast too, like encouraging others and acting as a mentor in some ways to people who you've never met?
Well, I mean, James said the podcast came from the website. The website came from, you know, doing Q&As after a screening of a film or something, and so many young people asking similar questions. So, you know, it's one's extension of the other. It's all about trying to,
I think what's actually really important too, which comes up a lot, is that it's not always a smooth path. And when we talked to Russell Carpenter, he talked about, and he's so well known, but he did some things and then he had a real low, and then he did something, and it kind of lets people know, just keep going. It's going to be tough. And just because you're having a tough time doesn't mean somebody else isn't also. And it does pass, and just keep going.
No, I think there's such pressure on young people today to somehow they feel the pressure to succeed. And if they haven't directed or shot a film by the time they're 21, they think they're a failure. And we had this director on the other day.
He directed American Fiction.
His first film, and he's 41. And he said, well, the thing is, you know, you need to experience life to have something to bring to your work. And I think that's true whether you're a director or a writer or a cinematographer or, you know, the prop guy or the art director. I mean, I think you bring life experience to your work, and it makes your work more interesting, frankly,
Yeah, you were talking about people hitting a low point in their careers. And at dinner last night, you mentioned, one of the times you said the time I quit filmmaking, and James immediately said, which time?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's probably happened a few times.
Yeah.
What can you tell us a little bit about that story?
I'd just been on a film that seemed like everything I didn't like about movie making, and I was living in London at the time, and I was basically thinking of regrouping and thinking what I was going to do with my life, So I moved back to Devon, where I was brought up.
I think the movie business can be quite brutal. And so, and you don't know what the experience is going to be beforehand. So if you have a really brutal film, I always used to think that 1 in 7 films that I did was going to be a nice experience. That was when I was starting out. So I just would wait for that 7th one.
Yeah, it can be pretty tolling. And I think that, what you two do in being vulnerable and open about the fact that it's not easy helps encourage people who are struggling, who might not be making big budget narrative projects, but who are experiencing that same type of hardship in commercial work or like corporate doc. It can be an industry that sometimes wants to take it all. It seems like from you, long days.
Yeah, but it's also about relationships, isn't it? I mean, any group, anytime you're working with a bunch of other people that you don't know, it may gel and it may not, and I think that you've just got to be realistic about that. I mean, sometimes you get on with a director and sometimes you don't. I mean, it's fair enough.
That's why when you're choosing a project, it's good to talk to the person that you're going to be working with, a director or a prop master, whatever your role is. And you have to sort of think of it like you're interviewing a roommate, because sometimes you just communicate in different ways and it's just never going to work. Other times you just have a shorthand right from the start, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, you work with a lot of the same directors again and again, so you cultivate these relationships. I'm thinking of like Denis, the Coen brothers, Joel and Ethan, Sam Mendes. What about those directors keeps you coming back to work together again and again?
Well, both those things, it's a sort of similar kind of take on filmmaking, similar approach, but also, you connect with each other as human beings,
And a collaborative spirit.
Yeah.
It's when the other person wants to be collaborative, because it would be boring if you were on a set that you didn't have any input into.
Yeah, how does this process start? Someone sends you a script and you like the script. Is it usually the director who reaches out to you to see if you're interested in collaborating?
Well, it's easier if it goes through the agent, because also if you're turning it down, it's easier if the agent turns it down. But we do read a script, and if the script talks to us, if it's something that we respond to, then we want to meet with the director, because sometimes a director has a completely different take, and that's fine, but it's not necessarily the script then we want to do. When we did Prisoners with Denis our first time, it was a script that could have gone very Southern Gothic and could have been a completely different script, but we also knew what he had done before, and then we met him, and he's such a great guy.
Yeah, you could see what his take would be from the previous films he'd done, that's the thing.
And then it's about, in the beginning, figuring out what the director wants, what his vision is, and then figuring out how you can bring that to be.
How long does that sort of testing process go? When you read the script and you're interested, and then you have the conversation with the director, is there a period where it's like, okay, we may do this, we may not, depending on how these conversations go, or you don't have those conversations unless you're leaning towards saying yes?
No, frankly, most of the time I've been working with Joel and Ethan or Sam or something, so it's like Joel and Ethan are doing something and it's a no-brainer. You're going to do it, If they were directing a phone book, I would do it,
But you can meet with them once and get an idea, and then go from there, because they're also auditioning you too, so you don't want to say, well, we can only meet with you one more time.
I've met with a number of directors that I get on really well with, but I know I couldn't work with. We just have different approaches. So it's you just, I've left a couple of meetings and said, well, it's been really nice conversation, but I mean, we both agree it's not going to work. So it's fair enough,
Yeah. What would you say is your approach to?
Well, I like, I operate the camera, so that's a no-no for some directors right there. I like using prime lenses. I like a small crew. I don't like multiple cameras. I like keeping things simple, So, that's the kind of filmmaking I like. I don't like, let's put 5 cameras up and just shoot the hell out of it and make it in the cutting room. That's not, So, you work with Joel and Ethan or Denny or Sam, and it's a lot of prep time. A lot of thought goes into actually what we're going to concentrate on. But on the day, you can throw that all away, and then you just sort of create something with the actors on the day. But I love that sort of that period of prep and discussion.
It's also it's a bit discouraging when you're just shooting everything on the day. If you feel that you've worked through the scene with the director and you know what it is that he wants, you've got an object, you're going towards it, and you go, well, we really should do this close up, forget this medium because of what the scene is. But if you're just shooting stuff for them to decide later in the cutting room, you're not really a part of it, and it's a little boring.
I'm thinking of your podcast when you were discussing Sicario. It was the Turning the Tables episode.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, it's the scene where they come back from Mexico, I think, and they're standing in the parking lot having that conversation, and you're all the way back, and there's no, you never go in.
Yeah.
You never go in. And I think that's one of the powerful things about your podcast is when people see, directors like Denis and cinematographers like Roger working at that level, and you were all like, hey, it's okay not to get coverage of this, not to get the singles.
Well, I definitely questioned Denny on that, because that was a run-on from we hooked in the vehicles and everybody got out, and it was like a run-on to a shot. And it just became so powerful with the big sky above and everything. And I said to Denny after he got a take that he liked, I said, well, we're going to go in, right? He said, no, if we go in, I might have to use it, and I don't want to use it.
It takes a strong director to do that because they're often being pressured by studio or editor or whatever to get as much coverage as they can so they can build it later. But someone like Denis or Joel and Ethan, they know what it is that they want, and they can say, let's play it in one shot.
It's not like, even Sicario was, a fair bit budget. I suppose it's all relative, isn't it?
It was
but
not
relative,
a big budget.
No, exactly. Relative to what we were doing and that situation, it wasn't. So Denny knew very well if he was happy with that one shot, we could move on and catch up on the schedule that we'd lost the day before or whatever, or get ahead so we could spend more time on something that he really wanted to, spend more time on, So, it's,
So you were just talking about budgets and the level of films that you're working on. I'm curious to maybe take it back a little bit. One of the things I find really interesting is the art versus commerce sort of scale here when it comes to filmmaking and then also just commercial work. Can you talk a little bit about, at the beginning, is it just, hey, I'm going to take anything I can and I just want to be behind a camera and working? Or from the very beginning, are you like, I'm only going to take projects that really interest me?
First, I got to say, I don't like that word art. I don't know why. I've always had a thing about that word. But anyway.
But moving on.
we try and help tell stories. But
I don't.
no, early on, I didn't really want to do it if I was just doing anything. So I was always a little choosy.
But it's determining, there are certain projects that maybe can't be done as great as you'd like it to be done, but you could do something with. There are other projects that you can see are hampered right from the start and are going to be worse than a compromise throughout. So you're going to end up with something that's not going to help you at all. I mean, because you're going to have to end up shooting badly. So I think taking that, because it is good to shoot and get the practice, but taking that into consideration as well, you know, because if you do a low budget film and you are able to do some things in it that make you happy, people who are looking at it know it's a low budget film and go, wow, you know, you've done that with no money. That's great.
I think Bob Rafelson said to me, he said, be careful when they say you can have anything you want.
Yeah.
You'll find you're in trouble then. You know, you've got nothing to react against. And I think some of the best films, the films that I admire most, are actually really low budget films. Peter Watkins' first film, Culton, was made for TV for like £10,000. I know it was a few years ago. It was like 1965 or something, but you watch that film and the imagination in it and the passion in it and what it has to say about a moment in history I think it's one of the best films about conflict ever made. But I'll say it's made for no money. It's about the imagination behind it and the passion.
It's one thing that keeps coming up in the podcast is with limitations comes inspiration. And it's really true because you're having to find another way to do it, and it ends up sometimes being a better way anyway.
I mean, that said, if you're doing a Blade Runner and you need 30 12Ks, then you need 30 12Ks. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, there's a balance.
There's a minimal, yeah.
That's interesting. Just the framing of with limitations comes
inspiration.
Yeah, I love that. So the budget, the restrictions help you come up with a creative way to solve that problem within the confines.
You know, I mean, I go back to Cullen again, Peter Watkins' film. I mean, battles are played on a close-up. And you get more from it. You get more sense of humanity from that close-up than you do from all the slow motion, huge action scenes and CGI of thousands of warriors. It's that's what really informs you.
And sometimes it's, you don't have enough for the set, so make that part of the set dark. And it's kind of nice because it's much more dramatic.
One of the first films I did, the first big film I did, I suppose, was 1984. And we did everything in camera. There's all these back projection, front projection, television screen, telescreens. And yeah, the budget, we kind of blew the budget, I guess. So we came to this crucial scene, which is what's in room 101, Winston Smith's darkest fear, right? We didn't have money for a set, nothing. So they just took the walls from something set previously, stuck them together, and that was it. But something about it, because it was so simple, it was perfect,
How important is mood when establishing the visual look for your films? I was thinking about this and remembering, the first time I saw Shawshank Redemption in the mid-90s, and I thought I loved movies at the time. I was watching a lot of like Star Wars and like whatever action movies would come out, and Shawshank Redemption really impacted me deeply. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know the word cinematography at the time, but going back and rewatching it, I see how much the visual look conveys the emotional resonance of the story. And you're known for being able to, your style changes from picture to picture quite drastically. How is part of that just trying to work off of what mood the script is conveying to you?
Oh yeah, I mean that's still one of the best scripts that we've ever read, isn't it?
Yeah, the structure
it's
of
a
that
wonderful
script.
Yeah, what Frank did with that script was wonderful.
But it needs to be according to the script because you are servicing the script. So you and what the director
exactly.
wants to say with
You're
the
not
script.
imposing something of your own on top of it. You're taking a script and trying to allow that to sort of ferment inside you somehow,
And it's also what makes it fun, because everything's different. You've got different challenges for every movie.
Yeah, after Shawshank, I've told this a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for an interview with a director I really admire. And they said, yeah, I'm doing this film. I want it to look exactly like Shawshank. And you think, well, yeah, but it's not the same script. Why should I just, you just don't create something by rote. That seemed like ridiculous.
And on the other hand, when Tim Robbins came to us about Dead Man Walking and said, I don't know if you want to do it because I don't want it to look like Shawshank. All right.
He said, I want it to look really bland. This has got to look like kind of nothing. I don't want the cinematography to stand out at all. And I said, yeah, perfect. That's exactly right for your script,
Let's go back to Team Deakins. I'm curious about your relationship and how it evolved from when you first met to when you started working together. Was that pretty much right away, or how did it evolve over the years?
I was a script supervisor, so I continued to be a script supervisor for a while, but that's really the choice of the director. So I'd be on some films and not other films, and we'd be apart, and we decided that we wanted to be together. So I stopped scripting, but I do get bored easily. So I came from a film lab originally, so I knew technically all this film lab stuff. So I would, and I also know what Roger's going for, so I would look at dailies. I would, if there was a dailies problem, I would follow it through. But then it became more and more. And for a while, I didn't take a credit or anything. And so it took a couple of weeks for production to understand the way we worked. Now we just kind of go in and say, this is the way that it is. And
yeah, but also things changed a lot with when the first DI, you were really, really instrumental in getting that to work on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And, just the whole transition into digital. I mean, you look around now, it's much more complicated now than it was when you had a camera and a piece of film and nobody knew what you were doing. And now everybody's watching everything you're doing, and all the monitors have to be calibrated, or somebody's complaining that the shot's too yellow when it's not actually, it's just the monitor. All that, so, and then all the post-production. And the fact that even on a simple film like Empire of Light, there's an enormous amount of effects work on it in terms of taking out a lamppost that's not period or TV area or whatever, little things. And so the whole process has got more complicated. You would think digital acquisition would have simplified it, but it hasn't.
And also, just what I try and do is let Roger focus on what he's shooting. So I talk with the visual effects people right from the beginning and figure out what elements that they need, because oftentimes they might want to do blue screen and Roger doesn't want to do blue screen. But there's always a way to get what they need and what Roger wants and come together. And I think on some films, when you don't have that intermediary person, there can be a clash between visual effects and cinematography, and that's a bad thing. It's also dealing with production, talking to them. And when we're shooting and Roger's on the camera and producer comes on and wants to talk about what's happening next week, Roger doesn't have to, because I know, and I'll go with them and say, okay, we do need this crane, we do need this, and just making sure everything's set up for the next week. And then following it through in post.
Yeah, we had dinner last night, and on the way home, my partner Jessica, she was just like, they have such a palpable chemistry, and she can tell that you two really enjoy being around each other, and you have almost like the ability to sort of read each other's minds,
we do. That's actually a little scary sometimes.
You're having a conversation and Roger can kind of feel your conversation getting passionate, and he just sort of like leans over, and you instantly know he's recognized this, and he's leaning over to maybe try and dial you down like a notch. And just watching that interaction, Jessica, my partner, she was a little bit nervous because, we've been together for 3 years, and I've showed her maybe like 6 or 8 films over the course of those 3 years that she hasn't seen that. I mean, these are really important. And when she found out you were coming to town and I showed her the list, well, she was like, well, these are all films that Roger Deakins has shot. She's like, I'm intimidated to meet these two. But she walked away from that, I think, feeling really encouraged that you two have created such a healthy partnership and balance. And I'm wondering, between the filmmaking and the podcast and Byways, the book tour / creation of this beautiful photography book, and then the relationship side, how do you balance the work and the life?
You don't have to balance it.
Well,
people say, how do you balance the work and your life? But it is your life. The whole thing's your life.
I think one thing is we met on a film and we worked on that film as friends, and we didn't start dating till the end. So for us, our first relationship was friendship and work. So it's easy for us to probably
we had one
too
date,
easy.
but you don't think of it as a date. We went to Rapid City to see a couple of movies, didn't we?
Yeah,
I
we
can't
did.
even remember what they
we
were.
were trying to stay into nights because we were doing
Right,
nights.
yeah. But
yeah.
you didn't think it was a date, but I did. But anyway, yeah.
I have nothing to say. But it's good. We do tend to finish each other's sentences, which is a little weird because we're very different people. And then people on the set they'll come up to me and say, well, will you tell James that da-da-da-da? And I go, wait, that's me. But they mean Roger. And they'll do the same thing to Roger. It's just, it's weird. We are different, right? You can tell us apart, right?
I can, yes. So how has it evolved from... I guess you were saying, was "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" the first time where you were collaborating on the post-production side?
On the post-production,
yeah,
but I was involved
James
before
was
that.
involved in the post
film
on
side.
just lab work as well. I mean, you went to oversee prints and went
Jarhead.
for Jarhead,
Yeah,
because they were being
the
printed
release
in
prints,
Canada or something, weren't they?
that I just viewed to make sure they matched the. And I also sat with a timer on that because we were starting Jesse James, and I had talked to the production, and I think for the first 6 weeks, they made a commitment not to shoot 6 days, so Roger could fly down on the weekends. And then Sam found out that Roger had taken another film and got very upset. And I said, "Whoa, Sam, he's coming down every weekend to work on this," because he felt like we had abandoned him. So he came down on the weekends, and then I followed through on the timing during the week, and then he'd come down on the next weekend. And that was the same time when I did the release printing with it. But
they just.
It's always
just grew, didn't it? It just slowly grew.
Yeah.
And as I say, as things got more complicated with digital finishing and then digital capture and the amount of equipment, and then you look at something like 1917 and the amount of equipment we had to test and figure out. And we went to Munich to talk to Ari to get a camera that we wanted, and they agreed to make, all those things that have to be followed up.
We actually were shooting with a prototype, so I suddenly realized that all of the software that you use, like when you ingest the dailies, when you're timing the dailies, when you're working in the DI, that software had to be upgraded to recognize this camera because it didn't recognize the camera because it wasn't official yet. Yeah. That was pretty weird.
Is this the LF, the mini LF?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
The thing is, I mean, the production can be a wonderful production. It can be fantastic people, but they don't know exactly what you're trying to do, and they don't know the equipment because they're not, camera technicians and stuff.
Yeah. So, and it's good to have a person that doesn't have to be you to explain to them why. I'd spend a lot of time explaining why. And the producers that I really admire are the producers where I come in and say, we need this. I know it's not in the budget. And they go, well, what is it you're trying to do? And then they might say, well, can you do it with this? And if I say no, they go, okay. Or if I say, oh, yeah, we could do it with that. Because they are looking at what you're trying to achieve, not the number on the piece of paper.
It's all, that you can cut some places and you need more others. It's all give and take.
Well, one of the tricks too is that Roger operates. So when we need more money, it's, well, you're not paying an operator, so we have that in the budget.
Yeah. shouldn't say that one really.
So are you the negotiator then when it comes to making this stuff happen?
Yes, I oftentimes am. Yeah.
And there must be just incredible trust between you two.
But
Yes.
it's also the whole crew, because James actually, focus puller, first AC I've worked with now for 30 odd years. James knew before I did. James knew the key grip that I've worked with a lot. So the whole crew is like, it's like a little, has been like a little family. I mean, what will happen now, I don't know,
But it's funny because if we have a camera problem, they'll come to me, we'll figure out how to check what the problem is, and they wait for me to decide when to tell Roger, because I like to have the solution before we tell him that there's a problem,
Not that we had many, but yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of crew, I mean, I imagine these relationships are so important. Just watching 1917 again in preparation for this weekend, just now that I've seen it 4 or 5 times, your eye starts going to things like the masterful focus pulling on that
Andy
film.
Harris.
Yeah, and he's doing
Incredible.
it from the back of a van,
On a monitor.
next to us. I'm operating quarter of a mile from where the actors are.
And he normally did
van,
not
and he's
pull
doing
from
that.
a monitor, so he was quite nervous about that.
He usually pulls
Is
right
there.
by the lens, with a little whip.
Yeah.
There were some times I got chills watching the camera movements with the focus pulling and just how seamless it was. I mean, you don't notice it, or at least I didn't. When I watch a movie for the first time,
No,
I
you
just
don't know
want to
it,
go
yeah.
on the ride. I don't want to
Yeah,
look. I don't
right.
want to look for how they
Anything,
lit it.
yeah.
I don't want to look for what the
Right.
camera's doing. I just want to live the life these characters are
Right.
living, especially with 1917. But yeah, like 4 or 5 times in just watching the art department, the production design, and the focus pulling was just like.
Yeah, Andy, I was giving him a bit more of a challenge as well, because I was ending down. I didn't want to shoot too deep a stop. Even the day exteriors, I was shooting fairly wide, because I wanted the backgrounds to be like kind of soft once you got into that sort of size. So I was giving him a bit more of a challenge than it might have been. So
What was your
amazing.
f-stop throughout most of that?
Well, the exteriors were around 4, I guess. And the interior, the bunkers were really wide open. So I know a lot of stop pulls on it,
When you're coming out of the German bunker into like that front line area, you're rolling the exposure.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
And also that one with the general in there, because there were lights on the walls, so you come around and the exposure has to change. And
Yeah. But even in on the trenches, sometimes there would be a couple of stops difference between one end of the trench and another.
Oh, wow.
And then some of the takes went so long that the actual skylight was changing. So usually I was operating, so you would be doing it, or Josh, the DIT, would be doing it, and I'd be saying as I was operating, you better stop down a little bit now, slowly, and I was talking them through it, sort of thing,
And the other thing that we did is I was always on a headset with whoever was carrying the camera, so I could say, okay, a little more left, a little more right, so.
But, I mean, again, the whole crew thing is like one of our operators, Haik Kavookjian, I first worked with him on rock videos, We did Forever Man with Clapton together. So that's a long time ago. So I've worked with him ever since, on and off. He was on Kundun, wasn't he?
Yeah. Another
films.
thing that was great about 1917 is we did a lot in camera. The one where George is running by the edge of the trench and there are all these explosions. They were real explosions, and the
Well, not real explosions. They were cork, but
okay, they were film explosion. But
felt like it.
the extras, there were like 400 extras or something, they were told, when you run across, look out for the actor, be careful. But they got so into it, they were so excited that there's a take, and I believe it's in the movie.
Film, yeah.
Where they were so excited they ran right into George, and George tumbles. And of course, these takes are really long, and everybody's concerned that they're going to break it and then we're going to have to do it again, especially with all re-rigging all those explosions. But George just got up, and the guy driving the camera truck was brilliant.
Yeah, he was brilliant. Yeah.
He saw it, he held,
So it
and then he
slowed
went
down,
on.
slowly pulled away again, because that shot, I mean, it's one shot, the whole movie, but that particular part started with the camera being handheld by two grips with it suspended under a pole, and they walk through the trench, and then they put it on the back of a 15-foot Technocrane that's on a camera truck, and they hook it on as the vehicle's moving away. Then they cross frame because they've actually got the clothing on, so they could cross the camera. The truck pulls back, and then George starts running. And then at the end, it has to do the reverse of that. It comes off the vehicle and into the trench. So it was kind of complicated. So yeah, you get to a point, you know, like you're 2/3 of the way through, and everybody's going, and I'm operating. I'm going, oh my God, I better not make a mistake.
I don't want to be the one.
They're going to point fingers at me. You screwed up our take.
But after we did that first long take with the explosions and it worked, everybody came out of their little tents and wherever they were hidden, and there was such applause and excitement.
Yeah, that was, you know, I mean. Yeah, movies can be so special when it's a group of people all working to the common end. You know, it's like socialism. No, it's fantastic, and just that feeling when you achieve, as James says, you get a take that's sort of 6 or 7 minutes, and Sam says, "Yeah, that's good," and everybody claps, and then Sam says, "Okay, let's get a safety," and you go, "Oh
no, we have to do this again."
But it's a wonderful feeling, yeah. So I mean, you know, the movie business is highs and lows, and again, go back to the podcast. That's what we try and impress on people. You know, you can be in a really dark place, but then the highs are equally as, you know,
high.
Yeah, high.
That reminds me. I think something that came up at dinner last night was the community that you've all created, and how, you know, you address these people have a lot of questions about things like imposter syndrome, I guess. And I'm wondering, working at the level that you both have been working at for so long, have you ever struggled with that, or have you ever?
Right now. No, of course, yeah. You doubt yourself every day. Well, I do.
And I think also things change so much, and you have to keep up, and there'll be times where there's something new that you didn't know about. But if you know enough people that's like, for me, it's visual effects. There's always changes. But I know that if I don't know something, I'll just call someone up and ask them. But it is hard because everybody assumes you know everything, and you don't always.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome. Yeah. I mean, God's sake, I'm still the kid I was when I was growing up in Torquay and going fishing all night before I went to school. Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely an imposter.
So I want to talk about Byways a little bit, if you don't mind. You both came into town to do a book signing of your lovely photography book, Byways. And can you talk a little bit about when you started talking about, hey, maybe we should make a photography book?
Well, you've always wanted to, because you kind of wanted them to be somewhere in a book.
I didn't want to put photographs on the internet. I mean, I love photo books, you know, and various times in my life I've taken photographs on and off, you know. And it was...
The lockdown gave us time, and we thought, well, we should see now if we could do it. And our agent was great and looked around and found the publisher, and it was kind of fun.
Yeah, it was just a nice project really to do in lockdown. I mean, it's kind of crazy what's happened to it, because to me it was just something personal, and it's like, it's my sketchbook, you know, I just take images. There's no kind of consistent idea behind them. They're just like, yesterday I was wandering around town here and I took a couple of pictures I like, and that's what I've done all my life, just things that catch my eye. So it was kind of interesting.
How did you, people hear the name Roger Deakins and photography book, and I feel like assume it's going to be a series of behind the scenes photos of all your adventures on these legendary films, but it's a deeply personal book.
Yeah.
It's interesting because we sent a copy to Joel Cohen, who we've known for many, many, many years, and he wrote back and said, you know, I feel like I know Roger better now, which was kind of sweet.
Yeah, it's just personal. It's just, say, my little sketches.
Something beautiful about film is how those photos look now. You've got some photos from decades ago that are still really lovely. And I feel like that might be something that won't exactly be the same for us wandering around with digital cameras now, thinking about looking at these images 30 years from now, and like how much the technology will have changed.
I don't know about that. I mean, I don't really have. I think what's happened with digital though is people tend to take too many.
Yeah.
When you were shooting film, and it's the same on a movie as it is for still photograph. When you're shooting film, you kind of got a restriction, haven't you? Just the nature of film emulsion. But now you can just kind of keep clicking with a digital camera, and I think there's something about the moment, like Cartier-Bresson said. It's that decisive moment when you push the shutter.
It's a bit like shooting a film and just shooting a whole lot and doing it in the edit.
Yeah, and then cutting it. Yeah.
What was your experience with the book industry as opposed to making a film or creating this podcast? Like, how is it different?
Well, it's a different business, but it also the publishers are Italian, so it's a different
cultural difference.
Yes, right.
They're very
right. Emotional.
buoyant, shall we say?
Yeah, right.
No, but it was great. Actually, it was great because I don't have that many photographs. I'm very selective when I take something, and then I'm very selective what I keep. So I don't have very many.
They were also very collaborative.
Yeah,
because
it was really good.
Did the layout, and it's interesting because Alex Webb and his wife, Rebecca Webb Norris, still photographers, were in touch with me and said, and I told them that we were doing this, and they said, the hardest part is the layout. You should hire someone from outside, but we didn't. And the layout was actually a lot of fun because it was back and forth. And there's some pictures in there that they would have loved not to have been in there. They did want more behind the scenes. The only one that really refers to a movie is
it's the one off Skyfall.
Yeah.
Yeah, which doesn't have anybody in it. It's just like a still life. So I think
it's got the Bond car. That is a character.
No, I know, but I think it's just a quirky little still life.
Yeah.
So I think it's fair enough. But I didn't want anything else from
You wanted it
films.
to be more about
because that's the whole point. It's kind of my personal sketchbook.
Going back to something that we talked about earlier, which is just low points in the careers and failures. I think there's something interesting you keep talking about. One of these themes of this conversation is how restrictions kind of like support creativity. Film limits the number of exposures, so you're being more selective when you're taking images. Budget limits what you can do, so you have to get creative on how you solve these problems. And then we also talked about imposter syndrome and like even people working at this level, the highest level possible in filmmaking, can struggle with feeling that. And I think, are there any failures that have been instrumental to your success later on? Like something that you go back on and think like, well, this wasn't fun at the moment, but it really helped reframe my perspective.
That's a long conversation. I don't really want to go there. Yes, but yeah.
And also
the first time I retired,
I think also, Roger, you the shoot can be pretty grueling and tough, but you have that memory that you forget. And it's kind of like childbirth, that's why you do it again.
I think if I'm honest, I'm not the easiest person to get on with. I'm kind of passionate about what I do, and I have very strong opinions. So, put it that way. So I come into conflict with directors,
Well, sometimes when they're just trying to finish their day.
And,
Absolutely. I mean, I look back on my own. I think failure is something that comes up for me a lot because I've been at the point where I've wanted to quit filmmaking or just video production, however you want to call it. It feels like sometimes it can take everything from you, especially when you're on the road.
Yeah.
I've got a 2-year-old daughter and, it's like, you get on these sets and it's the only thing that matters is this job. You bounce from one to another, and then you're like, where is my life in the middle of all this? I think some of the failures that happened along the way, they weren't fun, but I look back on them as pretty instrumental in shaping the way I approach like those problems later.
Yeah, I think you always learn.
Yeah, you learn. But I do look back and think, I mean, unhappy experiences, but I look back and say, I don't think I'd have done anything different. You know, I'm still the same person I was then, you know. And I've always had it in my head that I would only be doing it if I'm enjoying it and feeling that I'm contributing something. There's always another way. If it's just making a living, there's always another way of doing that. And, you know, sort of like I said earlier on, our relationship, it's our life, you know. One's not divorced from the other. It's not work and personal life. It's not. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
You can't separate it. I don't want to. If I did, I would completely separate it and do something very different.
It's good to have a perspective. I remember one time a long time ago when I was scripting, I did 3 movies in a year, and I made some of my worst life decisions on that 3rd movie because I was so tired I couldn't think anymore. So it's always important to take a little time and like you said before, to have some experiences because you do bring it back into
step back
what you
from
do.
it. So look at it from a distance, get some perspective on it, you know, because like you were just saying, you know, you get so engrossed in what you're doing, and weeks after weeks, you know, become totally all encompassing. You can't really see it that clearly sometimes, which is fair enough. I mean, it's your life. As I say, you're putting everything into it, but I think it is good then to stop. And sometimes after a long job, the first few weeks after you stop are really weird.
Yeah. You always
very
get
strange.
sick.
Yeah, you get sick, but it's also like a very strange thing. It's like,
where am I?
You don't have a schedule. It's
Right.
like, it's a weird effect, but I think you have to go through that, and yeah.
What are the things that you both do to give yourself that sort of reset after a really grueling project?
Well, I mean, I was probably putting it wrong. It's not like you're doing something very specific to reset. It's just like you just get a refreshment, a perspective on what you've just been doing, you know. I don't suppose it's so much a reset. I mean, I used to go from one film to another. It was fine. I loved it. But, yeah, now I like the time between.
Also not being on a schedule, like getting up in the morning and being able to eat your breakfast slowly, not racing somewhere.
You never stop for lunch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because you never like to stop for lunch, but let's not go there. I think also one of the important things to learn is to bring other people into your process, to the collaboration. And if you're working with other people on a team, even if you're leading the team, to get their opinions and their input, because then they have a stake in it and they do better. And it also makes their experience better, just as it makes your experience better if you're able to add to a project. So I think
that's the thing. You do it because you want to be part of a collaborative team, you know, your relationship with the director. And then why should it be any different for any other person on the crew? They all want the same collaboration, you know, the set dresser with the prop guy with the art department, you know, everybody wants that interchange and that collaboration to get the most out of the experience. So, you know, you try and include people, in what you do as best you can, whether electricians or grip or whoever, you know, you want them to be part of the process, and it only adds to the overall success of it, really.
And even when you know the way you really want to go. It's just the way you approach people and say, listen, I was thinking of doing it this way. Do you agree with that? And let them have their say. It's particularly like you can see it in directors. If directors are insecure, and yes, we all have to turn to the director for their vision, but the good director will listen to everyone and then choose the answer that fits what they're going, or they'll turn to them and say, I don't really know about this sort of props. What do you think? And then they end up with a better movie. And I think that works in every department.
Yeah, how important is it to bring these crew members that have probably become almost like family over the years along with you as you're doing these projects?
Very important. It just saves time.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a couple of key people that I've always kind of insisted, on. Yeah, but I mean, it's different sometimes. If you're working like on Jesse James, we were working in Canada. Well, I'd have brought Billy O'Leary, who's a guy I've worked with since in Nancy in the States, but in Canada, he wouldn't have known the local crews. He wouldn't have known the way of working and stuff. So it's sometimes you want to.
It's also low budget, and also sometimes you get an incentive if you've hired a certain amount of locals.
So you have to weigh it up, the pros and cons. But I wouldn't have gone to Canada without Andy Harris, the first assistant I'd say I've worked with since Fargo. Well, since actually worked with him on Shawshank.
Yeah. I think also, I mean, for us, we like a quiet set. So if someone on our crew was being loud and noisy, as some people are, people work differently, that wouldn't work for us. What I tell new people that come in is you need to approach production politely. You need to get what you need, but don't make it antagonistic right away. It's just a different way of approaching, because we just have a certain way of working and we want other people to work with us like that, because they are all representing us, basically.
That's powerful stuff. I just want to thank you both for coming to Kansas City.
Oh, thank you.
Do a book signing and for giving what you all give through the podcast and conversations like these and the wonderful films that you both have made. I'm really looking forward to.
We've been part of, I would say, not made.
Yeah, because other people have had.
Awkward when somebody says that. No, hopefully we've contributed a little bit of ourselves in them. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you both for being here. I'm looking forward to the next Team Deakins podcast episode and the next Team Deakins film.
Thank you.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.